Good morning. Welcome to Northwest UU Church, where we are gathered both virtually and in person as one connected community. I am Diana Kohler, and my pronouns are she and her. I am the worship leader this morning, and I'm pleased to be joined by our guest speaker, Kendra Spilar, and Alex Myers, our pianist. If you are a visitor online and would like Northwest to stay in touch with you, please fill out the visitor form that appears in the chat box. If you are with us in person, you can fill out the visitor sign-in form in the atrium. And please greet your neighbors with a wave from wherever you are. And we have more announcements this morning than usual, so settle in for a bit, but just being mindful that we're not going to do this every week. Because we have some really important events coming up, we wanted to provide additional context. You'll find more information about Northwest and its events in the weekly newsletter, on the back of your order of service, and on our website. I am pleased to announce that our new interim administrator starts on Tuesday. Martha has completed her education to become a UU minister, and while she is waiting for appointment with the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, she will be with us to help get written procedures in place to make it easier for her successor. During her onboarding period, please do not ask her directly to do any tasks, no matter how small or how important. All of your requests for Martha's time and attention need to go through Reverend Julie. If you forget, she is doing her job when she reminds you that you need to give your request to Reverend Julie. We have an upcoming congregational meeting on October 27th after church, where we will be asked to make two significant decisions about the future of our congregation. The first is to continue the joint ministry with First UU Church of Detroit for another year. The second is more technical, but it's to extend our current board terms to June 30th so they align with our fiscal year, which is the first recommendation of the governance task force. Also at this meeting, the task force will present a high-level view of its plan for a new simplified governance structure, and you will have the meeting packet to look at on October 13th. If you have questions about the proposed changes or want to comment on them, you can attend a virtual Q&A session on the evening of October 17th at 7 p.m. Look for a Zoom link for that meeting in future newsletters. The congregation will not be asked to vote on the change structures until our January 26th congregational meeting. So we have a time to look at it and think about it. The pastoral care team and the Committee on Ministry and Right Relations are inviting everyone in the congregation to engage in a circle practice after a soup dinner at Northwest on October 24th. This is an in-person event. Circle practice is a structured listening method that can proactively build and restore the relationships we need to support one another and collectively address the challenges we face as a community. At this circle practice, we will be focusing on all the changes that have happened in our community since the start of the COVID shutdown and how they are impacting us. Northwest's largest fundraiser, the service auction, has begun. And you'll see a QR code on the back of your order of service where you can go to the website, log in to donate or register and get your bid number. Service auction is looking for silent auction donations like gift cards, baked goods, jewelry, or theater tickets. We are also hoping to have lots of events for the board items where the price to attend and the number of guests are fixed. Or if you want to host an outing for the live auction like a seafood dinner, canoe trip, landscaping help, tech support, or an election night watch party, then let the Service Auction Committee know. The deadline for donations is in 2 weeks, so think now, act soon. And both Ariana Abel and Martha Spear will be at the service auction table during the coffee hour. That was a lot. Before we begin the prelude, let's all take a deep breath and settle into a time of worship. Thank you, Alex. The flaming chalice is the symbol of our faith. We light it knowing this morning that many other Unitarian Universalist congregations across this country and around the world are doing the same. We light our chalice with words from Northwest's mission statement in just a moment. We light, please repeat after me. We light this flame.
We light this flame
to grow in spirit, knowledge, and action.
to grow in spirit, knowledge, and action.
Accept and challenge one another.
Accept and challenge one another.
To support each other in times of joy and need.
Support one another in times of joy and need.
Each week we offer a land acknowledgement. We honor and pay our respects to the land on which we live and work, which was violently stolen through colonialism, genocide, and forced removal of its traditional stewards. These stewards are the Anishinaabe, the Council of Three Fires, which includes the Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi, also known as the Ottawa, Chippewa, and Potawatomi tribes. And, sorry. We also acknowledge the people of African descent who were forcibly removed from their land and separated from their families through kidnapping and enslavement, and pay reverence and respect to them for building this country's infrastructure and economy with no compensation or reparations to date. And now, if you will rise in body and spirit to sing hymn number 121, and if your mind is nimble enough, we are going to change sisters and brothers to people together to be more inclusive. You could even change it in your hymnal if you.
So that song kind of fits with the story we're going to do this morning. This is a wisdom tale that's come down to us from Romania in Europe, and it's about a really early Unitarian church. And it's about welcoming and being and connecting with friends and being in community. Long ago, there was a village in a mountain valley in Transylvania. The people of this village were a wonderful community who longed for a church of their own, a place they could gather together. So they decided to build one on the hillside looking down on the village. All the people of the village worked day and night to build themselves a church. The stonemasons cut great blocks of gray stone to form sturdy walls. The glaziers made tiny glass panes and fitted them neatly into the windows with leaded lines. The foresters sawed tall beech trees into enormous beams for the ceiling, then covered the roof with close-fitting wooden shingles that wouldn't leak a drop of rain. The carpenters carved a pair of wide opening doors. The bell was brought from a faraway city and then hoisted up by ropes to the top of the tower. The weavers wove fine cloths for the altar table, cloths embroidered with flowers and edged with lace. The smiths hammered black iron into tall lampstands. When the building was done, the painters mixed bright colors, and everyone in the village came to decorate the church. They painted flowers and trees and designs around the windows and doors. At the end of the day, when it was finished, when the church was finally done, all the people of the village stood back to admire it. "We will eat now," a village elder announced, because everyone was hungry after a long day's work. "And later tonight, we'll come back to pray." Everyone went down the hillside to their homes and their suppers, all except one family. They had brought their supper with them. They ate their supper sitting on the hillside and admiring the new church. After they had eaten, they went back inside, and one of the children said, "Oh, look how pretty the church is, but we have not finished." "What do you mean?" "There are lampstands, but there are no lamps. The church will be dark when the people come back." "Oh no, little one, don't worry. The light of the church comes from its people. You shall see." And they rang the bell to call the people to worship and went back inside to wait. The sun had set behind the mountains, and night was coming soon. Yet in the growing darkness, tiny points of light came from many directions and moved steadily up the hill. Each family is entrusted with a lamp, little one, and each family lights its own way here. Where is our family's lamp? Right here. The many lights move closer together, gathering into one moving stream, all headed the same way, growing larger and brighter all the time. As the families entered the church, they set their lamps high on the tall iron stand. Soon, the church was ablaze with flickering lights that grew in every corner as all the people of the village gathered to pray and sing. When the service was over, each family carried their lamps home, with the flame lighting the way. The child turned to the parents and said, "So the light of the church comes from its people, but also the people take their light from the church, and we have that light every day." "Yes, indeed. And when we are not in church, even when the lamp is not lit, we carry the light of truth in our minds and the flame of love in our hearts to show us the right way to be. That light, the light from truth and love, will never go out." And always the light of truth and the flame of love from that Unitarian church on the hillside continue to grow and show them and us the way. So this is a great story about how church communities like ours unite people and keep them connected. It reminds us that church is not just a place, but a space wherever and whenever we connect with each other and share our unique light. So in the week and days ahead, may all of us, kids and adults alike, joyfully bring our unique lights together to create a greater light that renews us and the world. And may we especially hold on to this charge as our kids head off for their RE classes to explore it even more. So we're going to carry the flame out, and Emma has agreed to be our flame carrier. So come on up here, Emma, and we'll give you the bell to take that to class. I'm going to light it from our bell. And now we'll sing the children out.
This month's community partner is the Southfield Emergency Needs Fund, which helps Southfield residents overcome personal hurdles to achieve a satisfying and productive quality of life. All undesignated donations will be split between the Southfield Emergency Needs Fund and our congregation. You can give in a variety of ways that are now visible on your screen, and for those here in person, we will pass a collection basket for checks and cash. Thank you, Linda.
Good morning. My name is Mary Mueller, and I'm a member of the Northwest Pastoral Care team. I want to remind you that anyone needing the support of our community can reach out to our Minister of Pastoral Care, Reverend Teresa Rolk, in the weekly drop-in Zoom room or in one-on-one appointments by emailing pastoralcare@northwestuu.org. The collective cares of our community are recorded in our Book of Joys and Sorrows, which will remain on the red cabinet near the name tags. If you would like to submit a joy or sorrow virtually, please email pastoralcare@northwestuu.org. When I announce your name, please raise your hand. Colleen McInerney. Please keep all the folks affected by the hurricane in your thoughts. She is worried about friends across the road from a rising river in Tennessee with cars loaded, ready to evacuate. Please give them the wisdom to leave if needed. And Cheryl Hitchcock. Lois Hitchcock turned 94 years young on Thursday. She had a wonderful birthday. Congratulations, Lois. For these joys and sorrows that are held in the silent sanctuary of our hearts, I offer this prayer. Sources of radiance and resilience, keep watch with those who work or watch or weep this night. May the suffering be soothed, may the sick be tended, may the weary find rest, may the dying and those who love them find peace. May the joyous be shielded, and may all know that we are surrounded in a love that is with us always, a web that connects us to all that exists. Let's take a few moments of silence to be with each other in this sacred space, and we will come out singing Spirit of Life.
Our reading this morning comes from Robert Fulghum, who some of you may not know is a Unitarian Universalist minister. He talks about the fact that for many years he set himself at the task of writing a personal statement of belief, a credo. And he says, when I was younger, the statement ran for many pages, trying to cover every base with no loose ends. It sounded like a Supreme Court brief, as if words could resolve all conflicts about the meaning of existence. The credo has grown shorter in recent years, sometimes cynical, sometimes comical, sometimes bland, but I keep working at it. Recently, I set out to get the statement of personal belief down to one page in simple terms, fully understanding the naive idealism that implied. The inspiration for brevity came to me at a gasoline station. I managed to fill an old car's tank with super deluxe, high-octane Go Juice. My old hoopy couldn't handle it, and it got the willies. Kept sputtering out at intersections and belching going downhill. I understood. My mind and spirit get like that from time to time. Too much high-content information, and I get the existential willies. Keep sputtering out at intersections where life choices must be made, and I either know too much or not enough. The examined life is no picnic. I realized that I already knew most of what's necessary to live a meaningful life, that it isn't all that complicated. I know it, and I have known it for a long, long time. Living it, well, that's another matter. Yes, here's my credo. And before I read this, I'm just going to say, get over the part about gluten-free and lactose intolerant and sugar overload, okay? All I really need to know about how to live and what to do and how to be, I learned in kindergarten. Wisdom was not at the top of the graduate school mountain, but there in the sand pile at Sunday school. Here are the things I learned. Share everything. Play fair. Don't hit people. Put things back where you found them. Clean up your own mess. Don't take things that aren't yours. Say you're sorry when you hurt someone. Wash your hands before you eat. Flush. Warm cookies and cold milk are good for you. Live a balanced life. Learn some and think some and draw and paint and sing and dance and play and work every day. Some. Take a nap every afternoon. When you go out into the world, watch out for traffic, hold hands, and stick together. Be aware of wonder. Remember the little seed in the styrofoam cup. This was written before styrofoam was known to be evil. The roots go down and the plant goes up, and no one really knows how or why, but we are all like that. Goldfish and hamsters and white mice and even the little seed in the styrofoam cup, they all die. So do we. And then remember the Dick and Jane books in the first word you learn to read, the biggest word of all, look. Everything you need to know is somewhere in there. The golden rule and love and basic sanitation, ecology and politics and equality and sane living. Take any one of these terms and extrapolate it into sophisticated adult terms and apply it to your family life or your work or your government or your world, and it still holds clear and true and firm. Think about what a better world it would be if we all, the whole world, had cookies and milk about 3 o'clock every afternoon and then lay down with our blankies for a nap. Or if all governments had a basic policy to always put things back where they found them and to clean up their own mess. And it is still true, no matter how old you are, that when you go out into the world, it is best to hold hands and stick together. For this hymn, Jackson, you need to leave this mic on. Will you please rise in body or spirit? No, you know what? Sit down for this one. And sing hymn number 1037 in your teal hymnal, We Begin Again in Love. I thought they sang first. Okay, sorry. For each time that our fears have, pardon? Oh, yeah, there is, huh? Excuse me. Our former minister, Kimmy Regal, used to say that she modeled imperfection. That's my job today. So let us begin again in love. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference. For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible. For each time we have struck out in anger without just cause. For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others. For falling short of admonitions of the Spirit. For losing sight of our unity. For those and so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness.
Well, good morning. I am so very happy to be here with you today. Thank you for the invitation. If I haven't met you already, my name is Kendra Svilar. I use the pronouns she and hers. And I founded a company called Restore Resolutions, where we focus on restorative conflict resolution using restorative justice, which it sounds like you all are using in your circles. So restorative justice is a relational approach to harm. I've worked with K through 12s, colleges, universities, churches, nonprofits, and people entangled in the criminal system. So we're going to dig in a little bit today into those restorative concepts in our session on inviting restoration, a relational approach to harm. And I have to say, Jackson is intuitive. Like, he just knew I needed the next slide already. It's fantastic. So here's where I'm hoping that we're going to go today. We're going to start by talking about harm, that there can be layers to harm, such as emotional harm, physical and financial harm, damaged relationships, and inflamed structural and historical harms like racism, homophobia, and ableism. Next, we'll get into how the concept of invitation is central to having choice, autonomy, and to feeling seen, heard, and understood. And then how connection and real relationships come from vulnerability. Finally, we'll talk about how taking up that journey from harm to invitation to connection can result in reclaiming and restoring more of who you actually are. I'll note that we may touch on topics that are hard to hear. So if what I'm saying is causing you distress, not just discomfort, I want to invite you to tune me out in whatever way makes the most sense to you. So, and this is the next slide now, Jackson, with the pictures on it. Yes, perfect, thank you. When Reverend Julie first approached me about coming here today, I have to share with you, my initial response in my head was hard pass, no. But in my heart it was, hold up, let's find out a little bit more. See, I have an addiction that started when I was quite young. It's called not enoughness. Over the years, I tried many things to cure myself of it, like overeating, binge drinking, overbuying, perfectionism, workaholism, and self-criticism. And as you might imagine, none of those things worked, though they did distract me for brief periods of time from the stinging pain I'd feel inside. So by the time I was in late high school and college, I didn't want to be alive anymore because it didn't feel worth it. I didn't feel worth it because everything took a lot of effort. So the slide has a quote from Brene Brown on it, and it says, "You either walk inside your story and own it, or you stand outside your story and hustle for your worthiness." Whew. Yeah, that hurt. I can tell that hit someone there, because it hit me hard. At that time, I was really tired of hustling for something that felt elusive. My feelings of worthlessness came from harm. Kendra, can't you play that without making any mistakes? You're too fill in an expletive to try anything new. You're fat, you need to lose weight. You don't need to eat that. You're selfish. You're another expletive. Soon I started to try to anticipate what would be said to me and say something worse to myself so it wouldn't hurt as much when someone else criticized me. The level of anxiety and fear I had from not measuring up, whether it was at school, on my teams, at work, or in my personal relationships, kept me constantly attuned to my environment to watch for any threats to my connections. So much so that I started to lose connection to myself. Church had been an approved refuge for me for a while, until I was sexually assaulted by a youth leader at a teen retreat in high school. And I had no one to tell because I didn't think anyone would believe me or that it mattered. I didn't want anyone to get in trouble, and I was deeply ashamed. The connection to myself really started to fray. And soon, there wasn't much to share besides what I was working on, or, as Brene Brown said, hustling for. If I could have the next slide. And the truth is, many of us face layers of harm that have nothing to do with who we are and have everything to do with what we are. Worse, some of that scrutiny usually has to do with what other people think we are. Even more difficult is when we feel that level of scrutiny coming from people within our own communities who we thought cared to know about and understand us. So sometimes you will see real, literal, physical, heart-level resistance and violence to harms like that. The resistance or adversarialness or violence is not understood by those who haven't had those lived experiences. And those folks can't see past those acts of anger or violence or misconduct to the pain that motivated the resistance. And frankly, harm that begets that kind of violence or reaction and disconnection has been rising in our world lately. If I could have the next slide, which is how we know with, oh, Jackson, one more. Oh, no, you're right. I'm wrong. Which how we know with certainty that a new story needs to be told. There's too much harm among people, and that harm is a message. And we have a few ways that we can respond to that message. Okay, now next slide. I ahead myself. So here's a map, and it's of two options that we have to respond to harm. And in this map, the two options are our two storylines. One is a punitive pathway, and another is a restorative one. But both have their place. However, overuse of the punitive storyline has left us in a system that causes far more harm than it heals. So let's just focus on one at a time. That's a lot on one slide. Sky, have the next one. Thank you. So this is the punitive approach. And in that approach, harm, misconduct, and violence is viewed as a broken rule or law. And that broken rule or law creates guilt. And justice requires the institution to determine who's guilty or who should be blamed, and then they will impose pain or punishment. In this view, the act of punishing whoever's responsible will create accountability, or so goes the theory. The rationale is that offenders get what they deserve when they're punished. And this story is created by asking things like, what rules or laws were broken? Who did it? And what do they deserve? The punitive approach has been overused, as I mentioned before, and it's been overused in our culture to incarcerate, discipline, and punish, especially Black and brown people and those with disabilities at an alarmingly disproportionate rate. And when it's overused, it doesn't work. I should know. I'm a former assistant prosecuting attorney. I've been a compliance investigator, and I have seen time and time again how it doesn't work. People don't become accountable. They become more broken. They can be dehumanized, subjected to violence, and have financial cost and become isolated in that system. Danielle Sered, author of Until We Reckon, wrote about punishment that it does not require those responsible to come face to face with the people whose lives are changed as a result of their decisions, to own their responsibility for those decisions and the pain they have caused, and to do the extraordinarily hard work of answering for that pain and becoming someone who will not commit that harm again. See, those folks who have been punished in this way, they stand outside their own story of harm, the one they feel and the one they've caused. And they're trying to prove their worthiness, spending a lot of time and energy there, trying to prove they no longer deserve punishment. I could have the next slide. However, there's another pathway that could be taken instead of, or maybe even in addition to, a punitive approach, and that's a restorative one. A key element to the restorative storyline is that all parties must agree to participate in it, which means they're invited to do so and get to say whether they'd like to or not. This act of invitation becomes a foundational principle that fosters trust, open communication, and builds pathways towards healing and repair. With the restorative approach, the focus is on what relationships were broken instead of what rules were broken. And that when a violation occurs, it is really one of a violation of a relationship that creates, and that's the thing that creates the harm. And it's that harm that creates an obligation for repair from the one who caused it. So then justice is when the parties and community members who've been impacted come together, maybe in a circle, to repair the harm and to put things as right as possible. And it's where accountability equals repair, not punishment. And the questions to get to this storyline are, who has been harmed? What are their needs? And whose obligation is it to address those needs? Asking different questions gets us to a very, very different place. One where the community gets to bring their whole selves to the table to contribute to the outcome and walk inside the story that they create together. The concept of invitation can reshape our understanding of what justice is. That justice can be an active repair process instead of a passive, shaming one. Some aren't ready for such an invitation, which is why this process isn't for everyone. For example, a person who isn't sincere in their willingness to do sorry and not just say it isn't a candidate. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. Here's a more concise definition of what restorative justice is by Howard Zehr, who's known to be one of the people who helped the US come to understand the work. Restorative justice requires, at minimum, that we address the harms and needs of those harmed, and that we hold those causing harm accountable to put right those harms and involve both these parties and their communities in this process. When we prioritize relationships over rigid rules, restorative justice and restorative practices can invite all parties, victims, offenders, and the broader community to engage in meaningful resolutions that fit their communities. It should be noted that restorative practices such as restorative justice originated with nations far older than the US, including some indigenous nations that were violently torn apart by the US. And so as a US citizen, it's with humility and respect that I offer my understanding of the work so far. For me, this journey into restorative practices really started when I met Alex, my husband, who was pictured on that slide along with my 2 kids. It's in the slide before that. Sorry, Jackson. Every time I say slide, I think he's like, okay, God, so I'm sorry, I'm overusing the word. So Alex, Georgia, and Simon are in that picture. So Alex, he slowed down. He took the time to hear my hurt heart time and time and time again. He extended me empathy and compassion, and by doing so, created a space of high trust. He also, by taking all of that time, energy, and attention, put marbles of trust in the idea that me just being here matters. He often has said to me, I wish you could see you the way I do. And honestly, this is where the work begins with all my restorative cases, with deep listening, empathy, and compassion so that people can feel seen, heard, and understood. You have to feel valued, like you're someone of value enough to make a difference in another person's life before you can feel empowered enough to begin the repair work in earnest with someone else. When I saw that my hurt was hurting my family, not just in how I wasn't seeing my own value, but in how I was working at places that didn't value me, and I brought my anger home, hurting Alex and sometimes my kids just with some of my words and energy, I knew it was time for something to change. If I could have the next slide now. Before the repair work with another person begins, however, you need empathy, as I mentioned, and you need the work of building a positive relationship to yourself. Pictured here is what's known as the restorative practices pyramid. At the base and in the largest part of the pyramid, you'll see tier 0, like ground zero for restoration. And it's where you'll spend 80 to 90% of the time when you start this process, because it's where you'll learn to reconnect with yourself, your inherent worth, and your joy. I had a coach once say that joy is knowing yourself, accepting yourself, and loving yourself. And after several years of this work, I have to agree. That's what joy is. For me, a lot of the work in this tier has been about healing my inner child. I'd been frozen at age 7, waiting to be good enough to be loved unconditionally. I felt alone and lost, unsure where to begin. And now, after years of that inner work, that 7-year-old self has a wise adult in her life. Tier 1 is about building positive relationships with others, whether it's in your family, your community, or at work. And there are a host of practices and tools that can help you intentionally build positive connections in a group of people, even those who are quite different from each other. Tier 2 contains a set of practices for tough conversations, like giving hard feedback to a friend or colleague or supervisee. The tools in this tier help you kind of come around to sitting next to the person you're sharing the feedback with instead of positioning yourself across the firing range. The restorative tools help you stay curious, kind, and actively listening to what's shared in response to your concerns. Tier 3 is where restorative justice sits. And RJ is one of many practices housed in the other tiers. You'll notice it's much smaller than tier 0, and that's because if you're doing that inner work of connecting to yourself and the work of connecting to others, ultimately, you have much less need for the more structured practices in tier 3. And it's reserved for things like harassment, discrimination, and genocide. Tier 4 is called reintegration, to bring people who have been separated back together again in a thoughtful, intentional way. Perhaps they are separated by incarceration, suspension, or disciplinary action, or even a deep, cutting disagreement. Reintegrative practices in this tier help us identify ways we can support each other as we come back together. And I think it's through this work of reclaiming ourselves and our relationships and of doing the work of meaningful repair that we get to restoration. And it's restoration of ourselves, not of a system that can cause harm. I use practices from each tier of this pyramid almost every day in my relationship with myself, my family, and the people I serve. Because this restorative work for me isn't what I do to get a paycheck. It's what I do to be present in my own life and the lives of others who matter to me. It's become my approach to living life. If I could have the next slide. So we've covered a lot of ground, and I thought it might be nice to recap and summarize our journey. First, we talked about how harm can be a message of an unmet need. Second, we talked on how harm can also serve as an invitation to get that need met by digging deeper into the pain that may have influenced our decision to hurt another person. Next, we talked about how connecting to ourselves at that pain point can help us have real connection with others, especially those we may have harmed, so that we can see, hear, and understand them well. Finally, we discussed how moving through the restorative tiers of practice, we can reach a place where we can reclaim a connection to self and others. And this is what's happening for me. Because as you may have guessed, the process of learning, trusting, and loving is not linear. It goes in directions I could never have predicted. But now I'm in a place where I can be here with it, moving with the flow of that journey and inviting others to join me in it. And I feel freer and freer each day. What I hope you take away from today, if nothing else, is that there's always an invitation waiting for you to reclaim who you are from suffering. And though the envelope of harm arrives and can be painful to open, it's worth it. And others can walk with you in it. If I could have that last slide. I'm really glad that I got a chance to share this journey with you today, and I'm very appreciative of your time, your energy, and your attention. Thank you.
You are invited now to rise in body and spirit and join in singing number 95, There Is More Love Somewhere. We will now extinguish our chalice. Please repeat after me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of hope.
But not the light of hope.
The warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our benediction comes from Andrea Hawkins Kemper. May we see all as it is, and may it all be as we see it. We be the ones to make it just as it should be. For if not us, who? If not now, when? This is answering the cry of justice with the work of peace. It is redeeming the pain of history with the grace of wisdom. This is the work we are called to do, and this is the call we answer now: to be the barrier and the bridge, to be the living embodiment of our principles, to be about the work of building beloved community, to be a people of intention and a people of conscience. Amen.